אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא
Tony.
Shalom Aleichem, can you hear me?
Wa alaikum.
Okay, I can hear you now. Sorry about that. I don't know what was going on. Well, first and foremost, I hope that you're doing well. I had two things that I want to talk to you about, if you might. I don't know. The first question I have is, and I haven't seen you do a video on this, I just wanted to know personally, do you believe at any point in time in history that, quote unquote, the Jews had worshipped Rabbi Eliezer HaKanas as a deity or a god?
Yeah, they gave him divine-like qualities, yeah. That made him someone who's a divine son of God from the Quran's perspective.
Okay, I just want to know a little bit more about that particular perspective. So when the Quran, and I think this comes from 30 verse 9, where it says the Jews say that Ezra is the son of God, and the Christians say that Christ is, Jesus is the son of God. And I guess Ezra for the Muslims here is Rabbi Eliezer.
Yeah, that's one view, yeah.
Okay.
That's what I hold to, yeah.
So what is it about, what is the accusation being made here? What is it that the Jews, in your view, or I guess in the Quranic view, is doing to elevate Rabbi Eliezer HaKanas as a deity?
Yeah, so he's making things that forbidden that are not meant to be forbidden, and vice versa, okay? So that's called istihlal in the Quran. That's in chapter 9, verse 31. اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. That's, they've taken the rabbis amongst as lords besides Allah. Okay, and then the Prophet ﷺ explains this in the Tafsir, where he says that they took them as lords in the sense of istihlal, like I said, making halal haram and haram halal without ordination from God to do so. So that's the first way. The second way is, thinking that he has so much knowledge to a point where describing him in a divine manner. So, for example, saying if all seas were ink and all trees were pens or something along those lines, there's a statement there in the Talmud that describes the knowledge of Rabbi Eliezer. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that about himself in the Quran. Similar to how Jesus says the hour is near and the Son of Man will raise the dead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the hour is near and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise the dead. So this is the point, that showing that there's these divine claims associated with these figures. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, no, these are claims you can only associate with Allah.
So the first problem I have is you didn't really give an example of where Rabbi Eliezer HaKanas had made a mitzvah that was illegal, legal. So I can't really respond to that substantively, other than to say I don't think that is the case, and I think you would be hard-pressed to find any Jewish literature that states the opposite. So the second point...
Don't you believe that rabbis can get revelation to give rulings?
So what do you mean by revelation? Because that word there seems particular. I'm not sure why.
Okay. So, all right. So, don't they receive interpretations that are stuff that God has shown them, in a sense? So, for example, there's let's say, for example, the interpretation of the Old Testament, by the way, and I've looked into their interpretations, there's a lot of ta'wil, there's a lot of reinterpretation, right? And a lot of the time the reinterpretations go back to the rabbis, and they distort the meaning of the Torah, in my view, right? But regardless, I don't have one on me right now, an example I can show you with that. But that's just like but that's just a general statement on the rabbis. The rabbis
even generally
the rabbis would make something halal haram or haram halal in the perspective of Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ speaks about some of those examples. I can get them up.
Well, again, I would take issue even with your general pronouncement here, because of course you know that rabbis disagree when it comes to interpretation of the Tanakh. So I'm not even sure on what behalf or whose behalf of the rabbis in which you're speaking. It's very controversial. I was just in a Torah study today, and there's a lot of different controversy in terms of interpretation on a lot of the biblical issues. So I'm not.
Isn't there a text from the Talmud that says that everything that so God's son is Eliezer, everything that he says is true? Isn't there a Talmud text that says that?
This is what's very interesting. So there's a lot of descriptive and narrative language that's used in rabbinic literature, and particularly in the Talmud, to express, and I think you're talking about the Mishnah, to express, certain opinions and sentiments. That isn't to say that it's literally true. And that's what I thought was interesting, what you're saying about Rabbi Eliezer Hakanis, because of course that Eliezer Rabbi, he's very controversial. He's a very controversial figure in Judaism. But there are other students of different rabbis who obviously disagree quite sharply with Rabbi Eliezer Hakanis, and in the same sort of literary style, will decorate their own rabbis. And we see this in the Mishnah when actually Abba is a student of Eleazar ben Arak. And what he says of Eleazar ben Arak is that if all the other rabbis were on the other side, that Eleazar Arak would outweigh them, which is exactly the same sort of language that's used to describe Eleazar Hakanis by his students. So it's a sort of jesting back and forth, sparring debate. It's not to be taken literal in any sense.
Yeah, the Quran doesn't work that way. So when you say stuff that in your syntax in the context, you can't just say, "Oh, Eliezer is the all-powerful," but I don't really mean he's the most powerful. Or, "Oh, Eliezer knows all things," but I don't really mean that. No, that's not how it works. So syntax has meaning. When you say words, when you say sentences, they have meaning, and when you say that, it's blasphemous.
Well,
okay, now, even if I grant you, that in the Talmud, Jews believe that, okay, this is all just hyperbole and whatnot. That doesn't even, I don't know what you're getting at, because still, I can believe that in Medina there are those that took it to an extra extent. They committed the ghulu in the context of Eliezer, and they took it to a higher extent. So even if I grant you the Talmud and these rabbis took it as hyperbole, and I even grant you that, that doesn't mean the Jews in Medina are the same. So I don't get what your point is.
Well, I think it's a general question. Now, if you're saying, and that's why I said Jews in quote, because I don't think it was explicit exactly who you're saying had these views of Eliezer Hakanis. I'm not even particularly sure if the Jews in Medina, I think that I don't want to be disrespectful, but I would say that's probably a cop out on your part. I would like to see in literary truth that they held such views. But then you're kind of doing the same thing the Christians do with the Jewish text, and that's ignoring the idiomatic constructions that are developed in both of the literary expressions. So you might I guess the Quran wants to disagree with how Jews describe and use figurative language in their narratives, but that's just to misunderstand the sort of narrative devices that are being used, because the Jews themselves don't actually believe that Rabbi Hakanis actually knows all things, and don't actually believe that he's smarter than all other rabbis in the world. So that would mean to say that the Quranic perspective sort of has an infantile approach when analyzing the Jewish text and Jewish literature, particularly rabbinic.
It doesn't matter, because first of all, there's two perspectives, like I just said. One, I already think that a lot of the Jewish texts, you already have cop-out interpretations for a lot of it when it comes to God's deficiencies. And you're just applying that same standard to the Talmud, which we don't have to grant. But even if we do grant, like I said, that just means that Jews in Medina took it to an extra extent where they did take it to this level. Okay, and it's not a cop out, because if you're gonna say that, oh, that's just a cop out, but you don't even have any knowledge of what the Jews in Medina even believed, then that's just your own presumption, being like you're just
Well, you're
forcing
the one
that.
that's making the assertion. So if
No, no,
you
no,
have to-
yeah, but I already have, but I already believe that the Quran, generally speaking, a lot of the times whenever we have the Quran citing stuff, we can find it already said before, and the Quran's getting it right. So I have no reason to assume a priori. I have no reason to assume that the Quran would be getting Eliezer wrong. There surely must have been a Jew that said it if the Quran is saying it. Not because the Quran, I'm saying, oh, necessarily
So you're
it's from
saying
Allah,
that the Quran would
but
be
I'm saying
right
the Quran.
You're
Yeah,
saying that
the
the Quran would be
the
right
Quran knows the Torah well. Let me finish. The Quran knows the Torah well and knows the gospel well. There's no reason for me to think that the author would be ignorant of the claims surrounding his region when he's able to be very acquainted with it and engaging with it on a high level. So for that reason, I don't believe that this is a cop out, of course.
Taylor had made such a claim of Eliezer Hakanas in a literal sense, then the Quran be right. Doesn't even have to be talking about a group of people, but perhaps even here, it may have been talking about a select group of Jews in Medina, maybe not even necessarily the whole of the Jewish population in Medina.
Yeah, so just be like it's fine if it's a small group, yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, that just becomes, again, not provable for me, because of course you could always just say, well, we have recorded in our Quranic text that some Jew in Medina literally believed it. But the problem with that is the way that we examine what populations might have thought in the past is by the text that's evidentiary. So that's why I asked you if there's any literature outside of the Quran that might actually get me to help understand that this is
Okay. Look, it's so simple, Tony. Were there Jews that believed in two powers in heaven?
Okay, but that's different from Eliezer Hakanas.
I know,
Yes,
but I'm just asking you,
there was
brother. You have this issue. No offense, but I'm just letting you know. Where someone asks you a question, you don't answer it, and then you just start talking. Just answer it, and then you can talk. So my question is were there Jews that were heretical?
I've already admitted there were, in the late Second Temple periods, heretical Jews that believed in, and it's controversial what that actually means, but yes.
Like a pre-existent angel that acted on behalf of God, that was worshipped like God.
So I would not say that that's true. I think the sort of second power in heaven that we get that's best preserved comes out of the book of Enoch. We, the Jews, of course, don't, today, the Jews, we come from the Pharisees. So for us, we don't see the book of Enoch as being part of...
Okay, but it's very simple, Tony. Aren't there Jews that elevated individuals higher than their status in a way where they put him on par with God at times?
Well, I mean, that's obviously true even in Tanakh, because we have Jews who believe in idolatry and start worshiping other gods. So
Sure. So it's not absurd to just say in Medina they did the same thing with Elias. Is that simple? Well, so do you have any? So look, I'm gonna get this next person.